Having an accurate functional threshold power number is pretty useful when it comes to planning your cycle training and even extends to working out racing strategies. That's great, but what is the best method of actually finding out this number and being able to repeat it as you look for future improvements?
Yeah, well, two internationally recognised and popular tests have to be the 20-minute FTP test and the ramp test. But which is better and which is best suited to your requirements? Well, Heather and I are going to be doing the hard work today, so you guys can sit back and relax.
If you're anything like me, then you'll want to do the easier option. But I guess that isn't the point. I personally have only ever done an FTP test, and years ago when I was coached, I used to have to do the 30-minute test, and my coach would take those final 20 minutes, which would give him a number to work from. But if you're doing an FTP test, you need it to be accurate and actually reflect the current form of fitness that you've got now. That's essential because if you're going to ride to numbers, you need them to be correct.
Yeah, we should probably clarify that FTP stands for functional threshold power, and that is basically the maximum power or watts that you can sustain for an hour, for 60 minutes, at least in theory. Fortunately though, you do not simply have to ride as hard as you can for 60 minutes, unless of course you have a very mean coach and they set you that nasty challenge. Thankfully, there are some far shorter tests out there, and the most popular being the 20-minute FTP test and the ramp test. And Heather and I are going to be doing both of those tests. We're going to be comparing how they feel, the numbers, the results, as well as some evidence to the two options.
Well, you're going to need a thorough warm-up, including some threshold efforts before completing 20 minutes of cycling as hard as you can, whilst keeping as close to a continuous output as possible. The more consistent your power, the more accurate your result will be. And today we're actually using the full 20-minute FTP test on Zwift that includes those warm-up efforts. And how is it calculated? Well, in order to find out your estimated functional threshold power that you could hold over an hour, you need to times your 20-minute power result by 0.95, or take 95% of it. This is then thought to represent the amount that you would drop off.
And now for the ramp test, also known as a graded exercise test, whereby you increase your power output every minute until you can no longer pedal. It usually takes less time than the FTP test and supposedly hurts less, or at least for less time, which sounds good to me. You need to begin very comfortably and increase your power output by 20 watts every minute. It will suddenly start to bite, then you have to hang on for as long as you can, finishing at max effort. It should only feel really tough for around 3 to 5 minutes. And then to calculate your 60-minute FTP, you need to then take the average of your final minute. Now it does depend on what system or platform you're using, but mostly they multiply that number by 0.75 or take 75% of it.
All right, I think that's enough talking and procrastination. I'd rather put this off all day, but it's time to get it done, isn't it?
Which one would you like to start off with?
Oh, I don't know. I think we're going to have to toss for it, aren't we?
Okay, let's do it. Okay, heads you choose, tails I choose, all right? Okay. It is heads.
Oh, I think I'm going to get, in my mind, the worst one out of the way first and go with the FTP test.
All right, ramp test for me. Let's do this.
This is not boding well. Come on, legs. Where have you gone? Oh, jeez.
Well, one of the appeals of this test is it does start off incredibly easy. So unlike Heather, who's working hard from the off, I am going fairly easy now. But the problem with this is it suddenly just creeps up on you. And I'm getting to that point now where it's like a power that ordinarily would seem okay, because I've been riding for so long and it's starting to just still incrementally go up. It's actually starting to get really hard, sooner than I was expecting. Yeah, that creeps up on you. It's okay. I'm trying to do the maths in my head quickly. Not really what I was hoping for, but first test in a while. Cracking effort, so yeah, can't complain.
Oh my goodness. That's plenty of days. Oh jeez. That was so hard. Now, well, this is what makes it worse. I've lost 16 watts in 10 days. So either my calibration at home is terrible, or because my heart rate was higher, I worked so hard. 201 is my FTP score from that. I averaged 211, so 95% to be 201.
So some big efforts from Heather and myself today. Heather averaged 211 watts. That gave her a new FTP of 201 watts. Myself, I got up to and started 460 in the ramp test. That gave me a new FTP of 335. So we are going to swap over now, but we're going to have a big rest between, and I mean days of rest to make this nice and fair. But in the meantime, we're going to bring a little bit more science to this and delve into this in a bit more detail. And for that, we're bringing in someone far more qualified than ourselves, Steve Faulkner. Hey Steve, now you have worked with many top-level elite cyclists, including British Cycling, Hoob Wattbike, Jumbo Visma, Team Sky. I'm sure there's many others that I'm probably not allowed to say, but so I really do value your opinion. Now, we're tackling this FTP test versus ramp test debate. And I mean, the ramp test has gained a lot of popularity of late. People almost regard it as a replacement to the classic 20-minute FTP test. What's your thoughts on the two tests?
It's always something that's really kind of contentious in the sports science world as to what they're actually measuring, and even whether they're a valid measurement of anything physiological. Most people are going to know that an FTP test is trying to establish the power output that you could sustain for a prolonged period of time, and usually it associates quite well with 60-minute power output. But physiologically, you don't suddenly drop off the end of a cliff after 60 minutes of exercise, and having that kind of 60-minute marker as a measurement of anything physiological is a little bit misleading, really. And there's various kind of techniques and methodologies, not just the ramp test that you guys have endured, or the FTP test that we as exercise physiologists or sports scientists try and employ, that maybe have more physiological relevance to a certain marker. And what we're looking at is basically physiological markers of distinct kind of training intensity zones. So we talk about kind of like moderate, heavy and severe levels of exercise, whereby moderate and heavy are relatively sustainable. They might hurt and be uncomfortable, but they're relatively sustainable. So the premise of a lot of these tests is to try and determine the boundaries and the physiological, and put a power measurement on the location of those boundaries, so that a coach and an athlete understands, well, I can sustain this power for maybe this duration, but if I exceed my nominal threshold, which again is a contentious term in itself, I'm going to fatigue much more quickly, depending on how far you've gone beyond that.
Yeah, so obviously you've alluded to this already about the contentious subject of whether they're that accurate or not. Obviously, the ideal would be go into a lab, have this done accurately, but the reason we do this is it's easily repeatable. Anyone can do it from their own home. So, I mean, is there any research or evidence that displays the accuracy? If not, I mean, anything from your own personal experience?
Yeah, I mean, I had a quick look, and there's nothing that I found in a relatively swift internet search that has directly compared a ramp test with an FTP test. There's lots of kind of studies that have compared FTP tests with things like the maximal lactate steady state, or critical power, or various lactate or ventilatory thresholds. And there's, again, like with anything in science, there's some that say yes, an FTP test correlates well, and others that suggest that you either get an over or underestimation of what that value may actually represent.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, it's worth me pointing out that, I mean, I have literally just done my first ramp test outside of a lab. I've done them in the past where we were taking oxygen consumption and stuff, but to get my FTP, this is my first ramp test. And I'm very much coming from the 20-minute FTP camp, so I still need some convincing. The bit that kind of struck me was the fact that I was suddenly having to hit very high numbers during the ramp test. And for a lot of athletes out there, particularly triathletes who are renowned for being diesel engines, suddenly they're trying to hit numbers that they're maybe never used to hitting in training. So could you argue that, I mean, the tests just suit different athletes in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is an argument that a ramp test in particular is going to suit a certain type of athlete. And it's not uncommon that you will see an athlete do a ramp test versus perhaps a more kind of stepwise test that you might do in a VO2 max test. And I think you've done for me in the past, that they'll achieve much higher rates of power output. One, because of the strength that they have in their legs. It's only a relatively short period of time that you're holding high power compared to like a 3 or 4 minute step test where you might have to hold 375 watts for 3 or 4 minutes, and then it jumps up to 410 watts for another 3 or 4 minutes.
Aside from all of that, I mean, are there any other issues with the testing kind of protocols and how people might perform them? I mean, for instance, can you go out too hard on them? Can you fudge them to a degree? Like the reliability of them, I guess.
Yeah, repeatability, accuracy, precision of any sort of test you do, you want to maximise it to make sure you're getting the best data that you can. Obviously, an FTP test, you've done a lot, I've done a lot. Probably most of the viewers have done at least 1 or 2 in their lifetime at some point. And if you're not feeling on it, it's just 20 minutes of utter pain and agony. So motivation is obviously a massive point in that. And if you're just not feeling on it, or you get stuck at traffic lights or whatever, it's going to have a big impact on your score. And you alluded to pacing there. It takes a bit of time to learn and practice how to go all out for 20 minutes, because in reality, it's not an all out effort. It's a paced effort over 20 minutes. And of course, the big thing that a lot of people forget is to actually take that 95 or slightly more percentage value of your 20-minute power output. They think, I've done 300 watts for 20 minutes, that's my FTP. Whereas actually you need to subtract 5% or maybe 7.5% to get a figure that perhaps is more equivalent to that 60-minute power in itself.
Now, I've performed countless FTP tests over the years, and like you, I'm sure it struck fear in me every time, because I mean, it is a big effort, 20 minutes. So I guess you could argue that with the ramp test being shorter, that it is more easily repeated, and therefore more people are going to do it on a more regular basis and have a more accurate FTP in their training.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, obviously you're looking at a shorter test in the region of maybe 8 to 12 minutes, depending on the rate of ramp that you're using. Mostly it's around about 20 to 25 watts per minute for a male, and around about 15 to maybe 20 watts per minute for a female. And it's removing that pacing element, because it is just, a continual increase in power until you can't go anymore to achieve that maximal aerobic power value. So in that regard, as long as you're on it, you're motivated, you've maybe got your favourite tunes banging away in your ears, you should be able to do a fairly reproducible test. The problem with determining your FTP from that is that the kind of calculation is assuming that everyone's FTP is maybe 75% of their maximal aerobic power, which I think most of the kind of online platforms use 75% of that maximal aerobic power to work out FTP. Now that's going to change very much from individual to individual, and possibly, from one individual on a week by week basis, where for some it might be 70%, for others it might be 85%. So you're not getting necessarily a direct measurement. And obviously if you're using that as your benchmark to calculate your training zones, it might be that your intensity isn't sufficient to drive the kind of physiological and performance adaptation that you and maybe your coach would like.
Okay, so you haven't given me a gold answer today, which I was kind of expecting, but it's really interesting. And I do want to finish by also just a bit of a shout out to you, because you are a cancer survivor, and I know that this year you're planning to do the Tour de France route with a bunch of the Cure Leukemia team. So yeah, big hats off to you and best of luck. And I'd like any viewers that want to support you, where do they head over to donate?
So you can look on either my Twitter, which is @shfaulkner, or through the website for the event, which is thetour21.co.uk, and just click on my name and my picture and you can donate that way. Anything would be massively appreciated.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks ever so much for today. Catch up with you soon.
Cool, well, that was pretty interesting. It's now time for us to try the opposites and see if we feel those same benefits or comparisons. I'm not looking forward to mine. How are you feeling? Ready for yours, Marc?
I've done, as I've mentioned already, a lot of FTP tests in my time, the 20-minute versions. I know how hard this is going to be. I'm really not looking forward to this.
I'm definitely looking forward to watching you suffer. I'm not looking forward to ramp tests because I've never done one before and it looks painful, but hopefully I'll be over before you so I can then just, chill out.
All right, well, let's stop putting this off. Let's get on with this.
Oh, good luck.
Good luck.
All right, I have just started. So warm-up is over, and I didn't realise ramp test is on erg mode, so I don't have to think about how hard I'm working. I just have to keep my legs spinning, and the resistance is going to change for me, which in some ways is a nice thing, but when it starts getting hard, I think it's going to be quite hideous. But I'm starting off at 120 watts, so it's all good. And it looks like Marc's not even started his yet.
And I'm off. Trying to get carried away. It's the classic, going off too hard in an FTP test.
I'm done. What happens now? Because I can't turn the pedals. I'm toast. We have results 212. Didn't expect that. It's gone up. Now I can watch him suffer.
I've got 9 minutes left. I'm averaging 350 at the moment, which would coincide with the ramp test, but still a lot left to go.
Come on, halfway. You got this.
10. 2, 1. Ay, ay, ay. Ow. Damn erg mode.
Come on then. How was it?
Oh. It's definitely harder. There's no question about that. Similar FTP though. So literally like two watts in it. So it's pretty close.
All right, we have recovered and we've just about got rid of most of the sweat after that hideous effort. Marc had the harder one there, but it's time to look at the numbers. Go on, Marc, start us off.
Well, I'm actually really surprised at mine. So for the ramp test, I came out with an FTP of 335, having gone around 450 for the final effort. And then for the 20-minute, I went 333, having averaged 350 for the entire 20 minutes. So yeah, I'm surprised how close that was.
That is amazingly close. Mine is definitely not that close. So I obviously did the FTP test first and I was a bit disappointed with my 201. I'd averaged 211, so FTP 201. Today, my first attempt at a ramp test, and I guess I slightly knew that I had to hit 250, didn't give me that option. 260 was my bare minimum. I made it, which gave me 212.
Hey, nice.
So yeah, I'm going to take that one.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually got to say, I did not expect the numbers to be that close for myself. And I think just from my experiences and the feelings, like the ramp test, you've got to hit such a high number for that final minute. 450 for me, admittedly, I do that in training sometimes, but I know a lot of people out there that don't hit those kind of numbers. Yeah. So I actually wonder whether, as Steve has mentioned, whether a ramp test will be a real struggle for some people. Whereas the FTP test, for those diesel engine people out there, you can kind of settle into your numbers you're used to. For myself though, I mean, I'm gonna explore this again because actually maybe that means I could do a ramp test again. And it is more repeatable.
You're gonna do another one?
Well, just to see whether like in the future, maybe I could do ramp tests instead of the 20-minute test because actually that was so close. And I could repeat that over and over. I didn't feel anywhere near as tired after.
Yeah.
So,
I would agree on that bit. The mental, like I was so drained after my FTP test for the next couple of days, whereas I feel quite fresh after doing that ramp test. It was nowhere near as bad as I expected. And but I'm surprised because I thought I'm more of a diesel engine, that I would be better on the FTP test. But it does show, I guess it flags up a bit of fatigue if you've got it, and it's harder to retest, like you say. Yeah. So
I've actually drop in one last bit now. After the call with Steve, he mentioned, I asked him, what does he do? And he said, neither. I do the critical power test.
Oh.
So I wonder if that's
another video.
We need to look into that. So that's almost like 2 or 3 tests, and you look at your whole sort of power curve. So it's a lot more in depth. Obviously, that's something you're going to take a bit more time, but yeah, something
one for the future.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed watching us suffer and the information you've gained from today's video. Let us know which you prefer, the ramp test or the FTP test, in the comment section down below. If you have enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up. Yeah,
for that effort, you've got to give us a like, please.
Yeah, and don't forget to give us a follow over on social media and subscribe just down below.